Robert Graves was a British soldier in World War I who wrote a book recounting his not adventures, his experience as a soldier in the trenches. And it is a powerful, powerful story of trauma and resilience. And he tells a story from after the war where he was just walking down the street and passed a large field of flowers, a meadow filled with spring flowers. And he was doing fine looking at the beautiful scene. And then the wind shifted and the smell from all of these flowers blew across and in front of and all around him. And the smell, that strong smell, even though it was a beautiful smell, triggered a memory in him, a traumatic response, and he ended up on the floor, on the ground, shaking uncontrollably in a full-blown fear attack, panic attack. And that's because Robert Graves, like so many of the World War I soldiers, was victim to and terrorized by mustard gas and chlorine gas, which was a technology used by both sides in World War I. Horrific stuff. It would basically eat away lungs and tissue, and the soldiers feared that more than anything. So much so that they became hypervigilant in paying attention to smells, and anything that was out of order would send them into a blind panic. And there's stories of soldiers just en masse, trampling each other, running away from a smell that they thought might be mustard gas or chlorine gas. And that's what our brains do when they perceive a threat, something very deep in our brains. If we want to get scientific, it's the amygdala is in charge of our threat response. It thinks there's something out there that's dangerous to us. It sends signals out. It releases adrenaline and cortisol and all sorts of stuff. And the more the amygdala is asked to be aware of things, the better it gets at it. And it ends up in a state of hypervigilance, which means our bodies can never relax. They're constantly on edge. And this is not just a phenomenon that happens in wartime, even though it is the genesis and a part of the complex thing called post-traumatic stress disorder. But we as modern people, even those of us who haven't seen war, experience something very similar. Scientists have shown that social media and doom scrolling and even advertising triggers our amygdala. We get a stress response. We even get a fear response by what we're looking at over and over all day long. And it's because our brains are looking for something, scanning for something that is a danger. And when we see images of people who are happier than we are and enjoying life and surrounded by community, which is pretty much what advertising does often, and social media, very few people on social media are out there going, I wanted to share that I'm 25 pounds overweight and sleep deprived. And, they show you stories of being on yachts and having money and all of that stuff. And our brains see that abundance somewhere else, and it triggers a stress response in us because we think we are in a place of scarcity all of a sudden, even if we didn't feel like it before we got on social media or saw that commercial. Think about it. You can be sitting watching the World Cup and a commercial comes on, and before the commercial comes on, you are content. And then a commercial comes on and images go across the screen and your brain sees them. And all of a sudden you feel like you need whatever product was out there to be complete. And that's intentional. Marketers and advertisers are very aware of what they're doing, and they try to bypass our logical thought, our critical capacity, and to touch us deep down inside so we don't think about, do I actually need that Coke or that car or whatever they're selling? Now, this seems like a strange thing for a mini sermon, but for the next 2 weeks here at Hope Church, we're going to be talking about Sabbath. And Sabbath, to some Christians, is a well-known concept. To plenty of Christians, it is kind of archaic and not well-known. And to non-Christians, It's probably a baffling thing that they maybe have never even heard about or something they're suspicious of and think it's part of like uber conservative cult like kinds of groups. But that's not true at all. The Sabbath is a practice that began early in the life of the Israelites. Formation comes out of their time of wandering in the desert when the first commandments were given. And our text today is from the book of Exodus, that time of wandering in the desert. It's from the 20th chapter. And if you read it, it's chapter 20, verses 8 through 11. It says, Sabbath is commanded for the household, not just the men, not just the parents or grandparents, but for everybody, for children, for servants, even for animals, farm animals, those who are working and things like that. And it's fascinating because it shows that the notion of Sabbath, and Sabbath really is a way or a rule, for lack of a better word, of rest, where for 24 hours from sundown to sundown, you don't work and you don't do chores and you don't cook and you don't labor and you often don't even travel. You just step away from the machine of economics, from production, from work, from labor, and you pay attention to what's around you, family and friends and books and scripture and prayer and silence and naps and rest and all of that. And what's really cool about this passage is it's not given as a privilege for the wealthy or the important people. It's given to everybody as a means of recalibration, where it's very easy for us to get lost in what we produce, what we do. Even back then, they were focused on productivity as much as we are now. And this notion of Sabbath, although it's an ancient practice and one that a lot of Christians have kind of ignored or never learned about, might be the most needed practice for our modern lives, because scientists have shown that even taking a break from screens and images and advertising and social media for just a few hours causes the stress response in our bodies to calm down and allows us to just be present. And so Sabbath isn't a withdrawal from life. I actually think that it's resistance to the parts of life that are seeking to separate us and dehumanize us and reduce us just to being consumers or producers, rather than just being us, beautiful and amazing creations of God. Now, I'm fully aware that it is highly ironic that you are hearing me talk about this on Facebook or Instagram or during using social media. So I'm going to close and say, turn off that screen, turn off that computer, and go have a cup of coffee, read an actual book, and do yourself a favor, give yourself some love. And it's good not only for you, but for the entire world. See you next week.